Hey guys, welcome to our next edition of What's Cooking with journalists Nicole M. Wells and Charles W. Kim. So we are just getting set up here, so just bear with us for a few minutes. We're just trying to get the video feed together. Um, but in the meantime, if you enjoy what we talk about, if you enjoy our perspectives, please go ahead and like our podcasts, check us out. Go ahead and find us on social media. You can find us at SB Newsman One. That's Charlie's handle. Mine is Écrivain Spécial, which is spelled ECRIVAIN special E. So you can go ahead and check us out on those platforms. You can also find us at Grill Online at citizenjournalistnetwork.com. We're also there. So yeah, if you enjoy what we have to say, please let us know because we always enjoy feedback. So give us a shout out. Let us know.
Welcome, everyone. We're just sharing ourselves out here a little bit so that people know where we are and can jump on. And we'll be starting the podcast shortly. So just stay tuned. Hey, Nicole, why don't you just give everybody a brief overview of the things we'll be covering today?
So basically, we're going to be talking a little bit about, I don't know, if you had heard, but the CDC recently released new information about kind of a breakdown of the numbers in terms of coronavirus cases and deaths. So we're going to be talking about, what those numbers mean, and kind of whether or not they paint a misleading picture of the actual situation of coronavirus in the U.S.
And did you also mention we will be talking about the assassination of the Trump supporter in Portland?
Oh, that is right. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, we will also be discussing basically the political terrorism going on and how that poor man in Portland was basically assassinated, for his political beliefs. So yeah, we'll also be talking about that and the sad state of American discourse, and just manners in general. It's a really sad state of affairs right now.
Which one do you think we ought to lead with, Nicole?
Um, I think we probably should start with Portland, and that poor gentleman's death. I think that everybody needs a little bit of a break, at least from coronavirus. It's all coronavirus all the time right now, news wise anyway. So, the other big elephant in the room is politics, seeing as how the election is not far off. So yeah, I think we could probably lead with Portland and talk about that first.
Okay, so what you're watching, folks, is we're going to be sharing this on various social media platforms, and then we're going to get to the show very shortly here. Just hang on 1 second with us and let us do what we have to do. So again, if you want to see us on Facebook, Charcoal Media LLC. And if you're online with us right now, please, say something in the chat so we know you're there. Okay, that's that one. Almost there, guys. Almost there. And one other person I promised. There we go. Alrighty then. So we have that, we have that, we have that. So we're going to start with this. Okay, Nicole, you ready to
Yep.
go? And welcome to the What's Cooking podcast on the Grill Online Radio Live 365. This is journalist Charles W. Kim coming to you from the sunshine state of Florida in Orlando. And we have journalist Nicole M. Wells live for us in the great garden state of New Jersey. We have a lot to go over today, some really serious stuff to talk about. How's it going, Nicole?
Not too bad, Charlie. Not too bad. Things are sort of kind of looking okay up here. Weather-wise, it's we've had some cooler days, so that's nice. You might actually be able to eat indoors at a restaurant coming soon. That's if you're one of the lucky 25% that's allowed in the restaurant at a time. So, we're making progress here in Jersey. We're making progress.
Well, that's good to know. There is some controversy over that because apparently New York is holding off on the indoor dining even longer. And of course, New York City is known for its, fabulous cuisine and world famous restaurants. And many of them are still remain closed due to the COVID-19.
Well, I'm kind of surprised actually that Murphy is doing anything solo. I mean, he pretty much follows in lockstep with Cuomo up there. They're kind of best buds. So, in terms of COVID, regulations and rules and arbitrariness. So I'm really quite surprised he's doing this on his own. He's moving on up in the world, becoming a big boy. So it's kind of a good thing. But I think he was kind of pressured though because there's an organization. It's like a coalition of restaurants up here. Last count I heard was about 85 throughout the state that was planning on opening for indoor dining on September 8th. Whether or not the governor okayed it, they were just going to say to hell with him. We're opening because we're dying and we can't afford to stay closed any longer. So I think he was kind of pressured into doing it a little bit earlier than he would have liked, because these restaurants were going to defy him anyway. So now he can basically save face. But even still, 25%. I mean, these restaurants are dying. 25% is not really going to do much for them. Open them the hell up. If you're afraid, stay home, but open them up.
Yeah, it's things just keep going on, and we're going to get to some COVID information in a bit. We know everybody's kind of
Mhm.
burned out on it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the gift as far as journalism goes. It just keeps on giving and giving and giving. But we do
Yep.
have some numbers and some clarifications to make. There is some information out there. Um, it perhaps needs some context and it needs some clarification and it really needs some analysis. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But the big story, I think, and Nicola kind of agrees with this week, is, and I did a little 13-minute video on Sunday. This happened Saturday night, and we did a little video on Sunday. Um, a Trump supporter in Portland, Oregon, was summarily executed in the street, shot twice in the chest. Now, we have some videos, and I will tell you, the videos are disturbing. The images and the language are graphic, so be warned. Be warned. But I think it's important for people to see and hear this from the people who were there, the people on the streets and things, more so than what the media may be spinning this to be. It's pretty clear what happened. So, for those of you watching on YouTube, again, the video images will be disturbing. For those of you listening, the first video clip is going to be of the alleged actual murder itself. So again, be warned, okay? And you can hear them saying there fairly clearly, and we're going to play it twice, but you hear them say fairly clearly in there, we've got one over here, we've got a Trump something here, and momentarily right after that, you hear the two gunshots. The friend of the man who was killed, we're going to identify him, police have identified him, and we're going to show you his picture and talk about him a little bit, as well as Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, because these two things, it's kind of a tale of two riots and how the media is spinning all this. But I think that we should, first of all, it is early in these investigations, and we should be very, very careful as to what we say because facts may come out. We don't know everything. But I think that for right now, let's go with what we have and see. What happened in Portland is pretty obvious. So, the only thing is I'm not getting any sound with it. Okay, why is that? Oh, that's why. Why is that? Okay. This was playing fine before. I don't know what's wrong with it. Okay, so you can hear them say, we got one over here, we got a Trumper right here, and then the gunshots. We're playing it again. And the gunshots you heard there led to the death of this man. And from the police, the update. First of all, we're going to. Let's see where we are here. On August 29th, 2020, and this is from the Portland Police Department. This is their official press release, and the photo is courtesy of them. On August 29th, 2020, at about 8:46 p.m., Portland police responded to shots in the area of Southwest 3rd Avenue and Southwest Alder Street, where they located a man who had been shot. The Multnomah County Medical Examiner's Office is conducting an investigation into this death, and the deceased has been positively identified as 39-year-old Aaron J. Danielson of Portland. The Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office has conducted an autopsy and determined the manner of death to be homicide and the cause of death, gunshot wound to the chest. Portland police detectives continue to investigate the homicide and ask anyone with information to contact them. And there's information here of how to contact the detectives and the law enforcement in Portland. Now, this happened the same day that a caravan of supporters of President Trump drove through the city. And there were some minor skirmishes between protesters from Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and the pro-Trump people. And this was all after a curfew and after folks were starting to clear out and the caravan had left. And according to a report filed by several news agencies, this man's friend was walking with him. And they were walking down the street, and someone said, they have one over here, we have a Trumper over here. And they turned around, and when they turned around, a suspect approached, and at point-blank range fired 2 shots into Aaron Danielson, killing him on the street, assassinating him, executing him, whatever you want to say that means. There is a person of interest that the police are investigating. Ironically, turned into police by his own sister. And we're not going to go into identifying him or anything. He has not been charged at this moment with anything. He is mainly a person of interest. But the images from the grainy videos that were circulating throughout the internet of this event led to this man being sought. And as far as we know, police have not yet put hands on him or questioned him. But this looks to be a case of purely politically motivated, cold-blooded murder. And if that's not bad enough, folks, we have another video. This is taken after the events that you just saw, where this man lost his life.
You're not angry, you're not paying attention. If you're not angry, you're not with me.
Everybody wake up!
Everybody needs to realize what's going on in these streets. Our community can hold its own without the police. We can take out the trash on our own. I am not sad that a fucking fascist died tonight. Y'all.
And again, we'll play this one more time so you can hear this person at a rally. This is following the death of Aaron Danielson on the streets of Portland.
You're not angry, you're not paying attention. If you're not angry, you're not with me.
Everybody wake up!
Everybody needs to realize what's going on in these streets. Our community can hold its own without the police. We can take out the trash on our own. I am not sad that a fucking fascist died tonight. Y'all.
Okay, Nicole.
I mean, I had not heard that second clip, prior to this. That's just this. I don't even have words. I mean, that is just one of the sickest things I have ever heard. To hear a woman talk about another human being being executed like that in such callous terms. I mean, where's your humanity? Where is your empathy? Where is your sympathy? That man had a family, whether he was married or single, he was somebody's.
Lost your sound there, Nicole.
And, he clearly had a friend with him. And I don't understand, how someone can be so emotionally vacant like that to speak about someone dying, not even just dying of natural causes, but being murdered like that. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Well, it's where we're heading. It's where this country is heading. And as I said on Sunday, my fear is that what happened on Saturday night, this could be a shot heard around the world, or a pair of shots, or at least throughout this country. This man was literally hunted and executed for an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the streets of the United States of America, this man was hunted and executed because of an opinion.
Yep. And I mean, that's why,
You lost your audio again.
That's why so many people are afraid to voice their support, for the president, to be a vocal majority and not a silent majority, because they're afraid of being assaulted, or, having their property damaged, or like this poor guy being killed. I mean, that's where it is heading. Like you said, it's disturbing that is where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, and here's some other photos I have that I'm putting up from Portland. These are from the Portland police.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the weapons confiscated. Now they did on this day of the caravan, they did make a series of arrests. These are some of the rocks that were thrown at police. So you can see what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, this is where we are.
Yeah, that's the really frightening part, is that this is where we are, and this is where it's going to keep heading. The closer we get to Election Day, the worse it's going to get for people. And the fear is very real. I mean, that guy, was really brave to be walking down the street in Portland, of all places, expressing his support for the president. I mean, to me, that's an astonishing act of bravery. And he paid for it with his life, sadly.
And here, to give you an idea of what's going on in Portland, we have this. This is basically a ride along, and this is released on the Portland Police's Twitter thread. While assigned to supervise North Precinct's 3 patrol vehicles during August 21st protests, Sergeant Joshua Silverman takes a few minutes to discuss the police calls not being answered while these protests are going on.
And or use of force, including but not limited to crowd control agents and impact weapons. Stop throwing objects and or pointing lasers at officers.
And that resulted in additional rock throwing.
So at this point, there are about 200 what they would call direct action protesters. These are the folks who frequently engage in riot and property destruction. They are currently surrounding North Precinct, and so we have a bunch of our resources there to defend the precinct, which means it's a real skeleton crew managing all the calls that are coming in for all of North Precinct, so the whole geographic area. We're only taking certain priority calls, and so for right now, we're taking priorities 1 and 2s only. So that means a lot of the stuff we're just not getting to, and we're only going to calls where people are being actively hurt. There's an active disturbance where people are physically in danger. Short of that, we're not going to the call.
Wow.
Yeah, sounds like a safe place where I'd want to raise a family or, even live.
Yeah. So this is where we are in as far as Portland goes. And of course, there's been no secret to the animosity between the Mayor Wheeler, and President Trump. Now, I do have something else, and it's going to take me a second to pull this up here. But I want to pull this up. I want you to see it. And this is the press conference that took place the morning after Mr. Danielson was executed. Okay, let's see. I'm having trouble pulling sound up for that too, so I wonder what is going on.
County District Attorney Mike Schmidt, so let's get right to it. And the microphone over to Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Thank you, Tim.
Mayor Ted Wheeler of Portland.
This afternoon, my heart is heavy. My heart goes out to the family and the friends of the man who was killed last night on the streets of our city. I mourn with you. I'm going to support the police chief and the district attorney in apprehending and holding accountable those who are responsible for the homicide last night. I stand here with the police chief and the district attorney to again denounce the violence. The tragedy of last night cannot be repeated. All of us must take a stance against violence. And it doesn't matter who you are or what your politics are, we have to all stop the violence. For those of you saying on Twitter this morning that you plan to come to Portland to seek retribution, I'm calling on you to stay away. You, of course, have a constitutional right to be here, but we're asking you to stay away and work with us to help us de-escalate this situation. And Portlanders, I'm asking all of us to do our part too. One death is one death too many. Join me in denouncing all violence. Let's pull together in the name of peace and humanity. We don't always have to agree, but we've long done so without violence. That's part of what makes this nation strong. Let's end this long, hard summer and come together and work to support and lift each other, not tear each other apart. I'm going to continue to work with the community on the historic changes that we've already made and have committed to making as we reimagine what public safety and racial justice can look like in our community. And we'll continue to do that work in the weeks and the months ahead. There's so much work to do, and I'll be intentionally engaging the public as we proceed to engage in that hard work together. Yesterday's events began with hundreds of cars filled with supporters of the president, rallying in Clackamas County and then driving through downtown Portland. They were supported and energized by the president himself. President Trump, for 4 years, we've had to live with you and your racist attacks on black people. We learned early about your sexist attitudes towards women. We've had to endure clips of you mocking a disabled man. We've had to listen to your anti-democratic attacks on journalists. We've read your tweets slamming private citizens to the point of receiving death threats. And we've listened to your attacks on immigrants. We've listened to you label Mexicans rapists. We've heard you say that John McCain wasn't a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And now you're attacking Democratic mayors and the very institutions of democracy that have served this nation well since its founding. Do you seriously wonder, Mr. President, why this is the first time in decades that America has seen this level of violence? It's you who have created the hate and the division. It's you who have not found a way to say the names of black people killed by police officers, even as people in law enforcement have. And it's you who claimed that white supremacists are good people. Your campaign of fear is as anti-democratic as anything you've done to create hate and vitriol in our beautiful country. You've tried to divide us more than any other figure in modern history. And now you want me to stop the violence that you helped create. What America needs is for you to be stopped so that we can come back together as one America while recognizing that we must demand that all people, black, brown, white, every color, from every political persuasion, pull together and hold all people accountable in stopping racism and violence, and we together are peaceful again under new leadership that reflects who we really are, we the people of this great nation. President Trump, you bring no peace. You bring no respect to our democracy. You, Mr. President, need to do your job as the leader of this nation. And I, Mr. President, will do my job as the mayor of this city. And we will both be held accountable, as we should. I'm also calling out every other elected official in Oregon to join me, not only in defeating racism, but also in helping me to stop the violence, as we are and will continue to be held accountable by all of our residents. Today, we need to decide who we are and where we want to go from here. Don't let this be the spark that sets off an acceleration of hostilities in our beautiful city. Those are not our values. What happened last night does not move us forward. It sets us back. I know the values of this community. I was born and raised here. I found my living here. I raised my family here. This is where I want to be, and I know the values of this community. We want to protest powerfully and peacefully. We believe that Black Lives Matter. And we believe that it's the responsibility of our leaders to ensure that the systems that we have in place to protect and serve do so equitably. Let's engage with each other in thoughtful dialogue about reform and use the power of our shared values to move forward together. We must recommit our energy and our resources to advancing the work of reform and the transformation of our systems. We've seen the positive power of collective and focused and nonviolent action. We've seen the change. Our responsibility to each other is to keep moving forward. Portland is counting on its leaders, the city, the county, the state, our federal partners, to partner and use the collective power of our officers to create a better future for all of us. Thank you.
Lord, is he finally done talking?
Well,
Good Lord.
well, we wanted to be fair. We wanted to make sure that his remarks were totally left in context the whole thing. There's a lot to unpack there.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I'm just talking about, could he hear himself talk anymore? I mean, basically his whole speech, like 3/4 of his speech was about, how awful the president is. And a quarter of it was, maybe even less than a quarter, maybe an eighth of his speech was about, how awful it was that this poor guy got executed. Just terrible. That was just an awful speech. And it just went on and on and on. It was like this awful nightmare. So it was just awful.
Not only that, come on, Mayor. You're the lunatic who told your police officers to stand down. You are the person allowing the violence in your city. President Trump has offered you again and again and again and again to send federal help to you to quell the violence, and you have slapped him in the face. You wrote him a letter directly refusing the help. So let's talk for a minute about who really wants to end the violence. It's not you, Mr. Mayor Wheeler. It's not you. And guess what? I see today in the headlines from your papers up there that you have to move from your $840,000 condo because the mob has showed up on your doorstep, and now they're coming for you. Now they're coming for you. All your talk, all your bending a knee, and now they're still coming for you. Didn't work, did it, pal? Didn't work. They're still going to be trying to set fire to your house. They're still going to terrorize you because whatever you give them is never enough. Never enough. But what are you learning from this? Nationwide, more than 30 people have been killed in these riots. These, as the media tells you, quote unquote, mostly peaceful riots. Mostly peaceful protests.
Mostly peaceful protests. Riots would be more accurate, but yeah, mostly peaceful protests.
Yeah, I remember those videos from the, from the television coverage of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the civil rights movement in the 60s. And yes, there were race riots in Newark, Patterson, and cities, New York. Yes, there were. Nothing like this. And they were not part of the group associated with Dr. King. And I remember all the videos of his organization burning down cities. He rallied the people against this. And look at where we are now. Mayor Wheeler, you blame the president for everything. And you take no accountability and no responsibility for your own actions. The governor of Oregon has ordered sending state police and personnel into the city to try to restore order. However, the Sheriff's Association in Oregon, many of the sheriffs in the counties will not send their personnel to Portland because it has gotten too out of hand and too dangerous, and they respect the safety of their officers. And whose fault is all this? Mayor, it's on your watch. And oh, by the way, yeah, that's right. Donald Trump created the racism and divisiveness in the United States. Right. Ferguson, Baltimore. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a tick. That was before Donald Trump took office. That was under who? Oh! That would be President Barack Obama and his vice president sidekick, buddy Joe Biden. But President Trump is responsible for all this. How stupid do you think the people of this country and your city are? What kind of blithering idiots do you think we are? Okay, my rant's done, Nicole. What do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you finished?
For the moment.
Oh, well, okay. We can get a word in edgewise. So basically, yeah, I mean, it's not really a secret for any thinking person as to when all this started. It was long before Donald Trump took office, but it's just convenient politically at this point to blame him for all of that. It's the only card they've got. I mean, they're desperate at this point. I mean, the election is, almost, well, yeah, actually 2 months away. I'm kind of amazed we're here in September now. Last time I turned around, it was like April. But yeah, thank God 2020 is just moving right along. Yeah, I mean, we're 2 months away from the election, and it's the only card they have. I mean, they'd have nothing to run on, literally. There is no, great record of achievement, no great economy that they created. I mean, all of it, the economy is Trump's masterpiece. I mean, they can't.
That they single-handedly are destroying with all this COVID nonsense.
Yeah, but the point is that he did it once, he can do it again. But so, I mean, any thinking normal, rational person, will see that, the party of destruction versus the party of creation. Jobs, not mobs is probably the best slogan that anyone coined. And I don't even remember who coined it. It might have been Don Jr. I don't remember, but somebody said once upon a time, jobs, not mobs. That's really what this election is about. And so you can paint it in a variety of terms, but that, I think for our purposes, that one suits it best. But yeah, that mayor, I just thought his speech was just disgusting. And it was just so much a slap in the face to all the people that loved that man, that, was his family or his friends or, his acquaintances or whoever somehow knew him, that was just a slap in the face, because you started off the speech by talking about him, and then you trampled on his memory by, filling the speech where you talked about him with all this other nonsense that did not have any place there. It just didn't. He should have left it at talking about how this is a terrible thing for our city. We've lost a Portlander, and this should never happen again, et cetera, and left it at that. All the other nonsense about Trump and Mr. President, you've done this and blah, 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 blah. I mean, he was putting me to sleep when he was talking about, how he's so terrible, Mr. President, you are, and this and that and the other thing. I'm like, okay, dude, you just need to stop talking, because quite honestly, you're boring the hell out of me. I don't really care about your opinions about the president. Your job is to run the city, and clearly you've done a poor job based on the outcomes that are currently, happening there. You have, one dead guy, and your city is in flames. I mean, from what I've heard, businesses are leaving Portland left and right. So good luck, coming back economically, because who would want to stay there? I mean, who would want to stay there? Smart businesses, if they can get out, will, because there's no sense in staying where you're not going to be welcome, where the fruits of your labor are just going to be destroyed. So yeah, I thought that was a disgusting slap in the face to that poor guy who was gunned down. And he should be ashamed of himself, that mayor. I mean, granted, shame is kind of a limited commodity in America today. There really isn't much shame anywhere, but yeah, if he has any sense of shame, he should be ashamed of himself for that.
Well, there's also Jocelyn James Scott. I mean, it's, the riots aren't the only murders going on in Portland, and this is just one example. I could show you 3 others in the same week. And in many of these cases, they're African American victims, and the perpetrators that are being suspected or arrested are African American. And these are shootings that have nothing to do with the riots, BLM, or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the stuff happening in the city aside from what the mayor is allowing.
Yeah, and allowing is the right word. I mean, he is endorsing, by his lack of action, he is allowing and endorsing this kind of violence. Agreed.
And a question to Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and to Mayor Wheeler: do these lives matter? These African American victims, the picture you see in your 16-year-old kid. Does his life matter? Because
no, his life doesn't matter to them.
Because it's not systemic racism that's causing this African American on African American crime in the streets of Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Not systemic racism.
Yeah, I mean, it's only certain lives matter when it's politically expedient for them to. You know, it doesn't matter to them when people die if it's not the right this or the right that. It has to be a favorable set of conditions politically for someone's life to matter. You know, if you don't meet those qualifications or those specifications, then no, I'm sorry, well, you died, and that's sad, but, you know, life goes on. So, you know, it's only if they can use your death to their advantage that your life matters. Otherwise, your life doesn't matter, which is a really disgusting, sick position to take, but that seems to be the way it is because, you know, we don't hear any mass outcry unless there's something to be gained from it.
It's really disgusting because statistically, okay, the number of African Americans killed at the hands of police who are not all white police, they're a diverse background of police. I mean, you talk about what happened with was it Freddie Gray in Baltimore?
Mm-hmm.
The police chief was African American. Some of the officers involved were African American.
Mm-hmm.
But that's systemic racism. I'm not getting it. Maybe they're bad cops. Maybe they're bad cops. Maybe they did a bad thing in that case and they should be held accountable. I got it. Yeah. Anybody, any police officer that oversteps their bounds and causes injury to an otherwise innocent person who's not threatening them should be held accountable, removed from the force, put in jail, the whole nine. And I don't think anyone with a reasonable mind disagrees with that. But this attitude that this organization has and in these riots, and you hear it when they talk, is that there was a Democratic senator who actually went to President Trump's acceptance speech of the RNC at the White House, and he was an African American himself, and he's walking back. I believe his name was Vernon. I think he's from Georgia. And
Vernon Jones.
Yeah, and he's a Democrat, and and the mob surrounded him, and this white woman, young white woman, kept screeching at him, "Well, the police are murdering black people. What do you think about that?" And he's like, "No one should be murdered." But what about the murder of all the black people? Statistically, folks, I mean, I don't know the number of years that this statistic is. Maybe it's 1 year, maybe 5. I'm not sure. I won't die on that hill. Let's say it's 1 year. The number of interactions with police, out of the millions that take place daily, just over a dozen, 14, 15 of these unarmed men shot have taken place, according to the FBI. All right? This is dwarfed by the number of African Americans mostly males, killed in Chicago on any given weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But when they burned down Chicago, when Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago had to raise the bridges because they were going into the downtown and they were breaking in and looting and destroying property, the cause was not the death of young African American men in Chicago by the dozens. No, it was the 13-14 that take place nationally over, however much time. Whether that be 1 year or 2 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
Now look. You look at the video of what happened to George Floyd with the officer kneeling on his neck, and you don't have to be a brain surgeon to say, hey, that was wrong. That cop overstepped his bounds, and he's charged. He's facing murder charges, as are the other officers who were with him when that happened. No, it's no consolation to Floyd's family, and I get that. He shouldn't have died. Now, there may have been, according to the coroner, there may have been a substance in his system that was a lethal dose. I mean, who knows? But with the police doing what they did, it certainly didn't help if he was in any kind of physical failure, even if it was caused by the drug. Kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes sure as hell didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we could all agree, if we look at that and think about that police officer doing that to anyone that we individually know, we would say that's wrong, that's excessive force, that's way over the line. The case of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, that's a horse of a different color. The guy was going for a knife, or even got to it in his hand before the officers fired. What is the officer supposed to do? Wait till the guy turns around and stabs him? I mean, all the facts in these cases need to come out. All of them. And if the police are wrong, they need to be held accountable. But we have to understand. I mean, you listen to that woman in that video, and she's talking about defunding the police. Just get rid of the police. We can take out our own trash. Oh, yeah, that's what we need. 2 days before, they were criticizing Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha. And he was the young kid who was 17 years old, who went up there because he was asked by a business owner to help protect the business with a firearm, with an AR-15. And he was actually, during the day, he was cleaning graffiti off of buildings. And then at night, he was actually, even though he's from Chicago, or from Illinois, but he's from the town he's from or lived in. It's only about 20 minutes down the road from Kenosha, so he probably hung out and worked a lot in Kenosha anyway, because that was the nearest city. That was the nearest population center. And if you listen to his attorney, he was being chased. He was being chased, and at one point heard a shot. Now, some say the shot was fired in the air, maybe not necessarily fired at him, but fired in the air. But if you're being chased by a mob and you hear a gunshot, he turned and in self-defense fired, and he killed somebody. Then somebody else comes up and tries to jump him and hit him over the head with a skateboard and grab his gun. So he shot him in self-defense, because what would have happened if he didn't? Then you got a third guy running up to him with a Glock pistol, taking aim at him, and he shot him. I mean, what are you going to do? Somebody with a gun points it at me. Oh, geez. Well, you're protesters, so go ahead, shoot me, please.
I saw something similar to what you're just saying. It reminded me. I saw a tweet online. I forget who said it. I don't remember if they were just a random person off the street or they were anybody, you know, noteworthy, but they said basically, you know, when you see somebody breaking into your house, I see somebody who didn't have the same opportunities as me or something. And, you know, when you would shoot them, I would, you know, talk to them and this and that. And it's like, that's a great, you know, kumbaya utopian kind of way of thinking. However, the reality is it's kill or be killed. You know, if somebody's breaking into your house with some type of weapon, whether it's a gun or a knife or whatever, they're not coming for a therapy session. You know, they're not coming to sit on your couch and cry, and get a hug and some s'mores and call it a, you know, a damn night. They're coming to take your property. They're coming to injure you or maybe even kill you. Um, no, like that's just not going to work. That's not going to cut it.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
You need a little bit more than that.
What do you mean? You know, because someone is going through a hard patch, it's okay for them to come in, and it should be okay for them to come in, sit down, grab food from the fridge, take my TV or my laptop, or you know, rape the wife, rape the daughter. It's okay. You know, they've had a rough life.
Are you asking?
I'm just pointing out how ludicrous the whole idea. Hey man, I feel your pain.
Yeah, I couldn't get over that.
Please have anything you want in the house. Me casa, you casa. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel your pain. I know you've had a rough life. My God.
It was the most ridiculous thing I think I've read in a long time. And there's a lot of stupid shit out there on Twitter, but I was like, I don't know what reality you're living in, but clearly it is a warmer and fuzzier version than mine. Because that kind of crap is just not going to cut it in that type of situation.
No, and but you know, this is what they want. They want our police to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
But what do we have? Are we gonna have a bunch of Batmans running around?
No, we're just going to have violent mobs that you have to pay tribute to make sure they don't attack you. And even then, it's no guarantee. It's just extortion. So, yeah, that's basically what they would like, apparently, because that seems to be their only, you know, their only proposed solution. I mean, short of licensing everyone as a therapist and inviting everyone into your home to sit on your couch and cry, I don't see any sort of viability in that.
No. You know, it's like I said on Sunday. When you look at what happened in Portland, them hunting this guy down and shooting him, and the other video, there was a woman in Washington, D.C. who was dining outside, and the mob came up to her making the fist, the Black Lives Matter fist, demanding that she make the same salute back to them.
Mm-hmm.
That rings some bells.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the Nazis did in Germany.
Well, that's one of the first things Hitler did is defund the police and get rid of the police and replace them with roving gangs of brown shirts. So, yeah, history just repeats itself, and we're headed down the same road. You know, should these movements to defund the police take hold nationally, which hopefully they're limited to these ludicrous Democrat-run cities, but nationally, should they take hold, that's a very frightening scenario.
But
it's, thankfully,
but it's scary because these guys are wandering around. Oh, we're anti-fascist. Well, you know what? You can put lipstick on a pig; it's still a pig. If you're acting like a Nazi, you're calling Trump Nazi. You're calling anyone to the right, conservatives who support Trump Nazi. Nancy Pelosi saying they're enemies of the people, but they're the ones running around the streets. They're breaking into businesses. They're stealing stuff, just like the Germans did to the Jews on Kristallnacht. They're beating people in the street. They're killing people in the street. They're demanding that you salute and give them allegiance and your loyalty. That's what the Nazis did. Duh. You are the fascist.
Hang on a second. So what you have is a giant national media gaslighting going on, in the sense that you have this narrative that's being created and shaped, you know, that is not necessarily what's actually going on. It's just what people are leading you to believe. So so it's kind of like a cooperative between the media and a certain political party that leans a little heavily to the left. So
Just
it's
a
just kind
touch.
of frightening that you have. I'm sorry.
Just a touch to the left. They just
Just
lean
a
a
touch,
touch. Leaning
a little
in.
bit.
The leaning in. Isn't that
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
we're leaning in.
Exactly. We're leaning in. But yeah, it's kind of frightening how you have these two groups kind of working in tandem to create this public perception that really isn't in a very large part of the country. It's really only in like coastal areas, like the West Coast, the East Coast, the Northeast, where you have people that think this way. But in a large percentage of the country, people do not think this way, and they just kind of look at this narrative and they're like, "Where the hell is this even coming from?" Um, and it's kind of scary, how much effort is put into this.
Well, it is. And I was thinking, I was thinking about this. We're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about how different the country is today, 20 years later, or 19 years later. 9/11, we unified. We all came together. Strangers of all backgrounds, types, ethnicities, lifestyle choices stood shoulder to shoulder going through the rubble at Ground Zero in New York, looking for survivors.
Yep.
There were people who came from states thousands of miles away to help. Some came to bring food, some came to bring clothes, some came any way they could support. We came together as a nation after 9/11. I can't even recognize that now.
No, that national unity, that front of, we're all in this together kind of thing, and not in the coronavirus way, because if I see that on TV one more time, I may just break a screen. But that sense of, camaraderie as Americans, we don't have that nationally anymore. I completely agree. It's much more of a fractured kind of American experience than it is a unified one. You have, left America and you have right America, and then somewhere there exists a middle America. I think it's a much smaller percentage of the country than it ever was before. But I think it still exists. It's just a much smaller minority than it ever was. But increasingly, we are very much a left America and a right America, and trying to agree is very difficult between those two groups. Mainly because each one sees each other as insane, essentially. The left thinks that the right is insane, and the right thinks equally of the left. So trying to find common ground is rough these days, for sure. And I mean, it leads, right back to what we started the show with. It leads to, the execution of people that have been deemed, the other, people that are not people anymore. They've been dehumanized. They've been turned into, a Trumper or a leftist, or, somebody that is not a person anymore. And therefore it's okay to just do whatever you would like with them, because they're not really a person. They're just the enemy at this point. So that's kind of where we're at.
Well, you had in the last week between the incidents in Wisconsin and Portland, in Kenosha, with Kyle Rittenhouse, and now the killing of Danielson in Portland.
Yep.
Both sides have now drawn blood.
Yeah.
Through gunshots.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me we're pretty close to a hot civil war. I mean, I hate saying that because I'm a little unnerved at the prospect of what this could mean. But on the other hand, if people are walking the streets, hunting you for what you may or may not believe, and willing to take your life without a thought to any humanity. And this goes for left and right. I mean, I'm equal opportunity on this.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at taking another human life, You know, there's a great line in Clint Eastwood's movie Unforgiven. This younger, he plays the old frazzled gunfighter who's killed, as he says, everything that's ever walked, crawled, or slithered on the earth. And, you know, he's not really super proud of that, but he's really good at it. And he has this kind of younger sidekick. And the younger sidekick is, 19, 20 something, full of juice, full of vim and vigor, but he's never killed anybody. He thinks he's real fast with a gun. He's all this, that, and the other thing. So it comes out with they actually have a mission. They have a bounty. They have to go out and kill these people to get some money. These are people who disparaged women of the evening in this town. And the guy who runs the town, Gene Hackman, I think his name was Billy Bob or Little Bill or something, and he had them tortured almost. He had women who were cut in their face so they wouldn't be attractive to men anymore, and that's how they made their living. So the women put out, got some money together and put out a bounty, and they contacted Clint Eastwood's character through this young buck to go out and take care of this job. And the job was basically they wanted revenge on these guys who had treated them so badly. So Eastwood shows up with this young guy, and they found a couple of the guys, and one of the guys they found, Eastwood sends the younger guy after, and the guy goes into an outhouse because he had to use the bathroom. And the young guy kicks open the outhouse door, and while the guy's sitting there doing his thing, he guns him down. And it really upsets him. And he didn't think it would. But Clint Eastwood has a really great line as the old frazzled gunfighter to this guy. Says it's a hell of a thing to kill a man. You take away everything he ever had and anything he ever will have. I wonder if the people in Portland, if that went through their minds. You're killing this 39-year-old man. You're taking away everything that he has built, has done, and you're taking away everything he ever will have. Maybe time with grandkids, whatever it is. You've taken that away. And I don't think that, maybe instead of gun control, what these guys need to do, what we need to do, is we need to get kids from a very young age, and I'll explain why in a minute. I come from upstate New York, and more cows than people, and everybody was into hunting and all that. And when I was a young kid, I had a BB gun, like Ralphie in A Christmas Story. And what we did, me and my group of my friends, is we would go up into the wooded area behind our house, which was pretty woodsy, and we would shoot chipmunks. To practice hunting, to learn how to hunt. Because, when you got to be 16, you were expected to go out and get your big game license and go out and hunt deer. So you could put meat, literally, we use that deer venison, most families, to feed themselves during the winter. And the one thing, even with the BB gun, even killing chipmunks, I look back at it now, I'm ancient now, but when I look back on it, I feel bad. But one thing it taught me at a young age, when you pull that trigger and you fire that gun, even if it's a BB gun, even if you're just killing a chipmunk, and you see that chipmunk die, and you see the blood, and you see the death that you caused, you understand immediately the power of that weapon in your hand and what it can do, even though it's only a minor weapon in the scope of things. But it teaches you to respect it and what it can do. I don't think these yahoos who are out running the streets have any clue the power that they have in their hands and what that can do.
Well, not only that, but I don't think they have any sort of respect for any sort of life at all. I mean, if you look at at American culture these days, it is incredibly dark. It is very dark. It is very disrespectful to life in all forms, whether it's unborn life, whether it's, euthanasia of old people, the infirm. It's a very dark culture. It's a very, very discouraging in general, for life. So I don't think they have any sort of respect for life, because if they did, they never would have gone out, and thought it was okay to take this man's life because he didn't agree with them, because, his political persuasion is different from theirs. So I think you're right. I think that instead of, this restrictive, nonsensical, gun control, which really isn't gun control, it's just, a way of disarming lawfully abiding American citizens and not allowing them to practice their Second Amendment rights. So instead of gun control, what we should be doing is we should be teaching people, how to respect and use firearms from a young age, and also how to respect life, how to respect your fellow Americans, your fellow citizens, other people. I think we need to bring respect back to American culture. I think it has been lacking for decades now. There's at least 2, if not 3 generations raised without the proper respect for life in this culture. And it's killing us, quite literally.
I agree with that. And speaking about euthanizing the infirm and the old, the time has come for us to move on in topics to the recent information with COVID. But before we do that, we do have to take a break and pay the bills. So we're going to do that. If you're watching on YouTube, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We are going to be back. But we do have to take a break for the audio podcast to pay the bills. So just hang out for a second and grab yourself something else to drink for our next discussion. And we will be back shortly. Okay, we're back. How's it going, Nicole? You ready for the second half of this?
Yep, you're ready to go.
Okay, so Nicole, tell us what we got.
So I don't know if you heard, there was a 6% was trending on Twitter the other day. I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, but it was within the last few days that the phrase 6% was trending on Twitter. And so basically what that was referring to is the CDC recently released new information, kind of like a new analysis of their data on coronavirus deaths. And apparently, according to this data, only 90% 94% of all coronavirus deaths had comorbid conditions. So they had something else other than coronavirus going on in their system at the time that they died. So only 6% had coronavirus listed as the only cause of death. So of that 94% that had other things going on, 2.6 additional conditions of causes per death.
On average,
yeah, were associated with each death. So in addition to coronavirus, they had 2.6 additional conditions also going on. So, I mean, that's kind of a big deal because that drastically lowers the number of deaths just from coronavirus, just from COVID-19. So, I mean, in the US, according to the CDC, their numbers, which I checked today, there's 6 million cases in the US. Of those 6 million cases, 184,083 have died. But the vast majority, 94% of those deaths had other conditions. I mean, similarly to other upper respiratory type things like, the flu every year. I mean, the flu, kills a large number of people every year. And it's, it attacks a lot of people, but the people who fare the worst are usually those that already have something going on that weakens their immune system. And it makes them, especially easy for the virus to attack. So,
well, I don't know if I may have gotten this number a little bit later than when you checked. Maybe you checked earlier in the day with the CDC. But as of 12:16 p.m., according to the CDC, 85,578,139 tests were reported. Out of those tests reported, 7,318,554 were positive. That gives the overall positivity rate for the USA at 9%. But you know what that also means? How are you at math, Nicole?
Oh, you're funny. That also means that the negative rate is quite high.
The negative rate, out of the almost 86 million people tested, by the way, that is 26% of the country. A quarter of the country has now been tested. We have about 330 million. 86 million is about 25% of that, 26% of that. A quarter of the nation has been tested. And out of the quarter of the nation tested, 91% of that quarter tested negative. 91% of the quarter of the population of the United States tested are negative for COVID-19. Of the 7.3 million, that's 9% of those tested, roughly, tested positive. Out of 7.3 million people, 185,000 have died, or 184,000 and change have died. Now, we look at the 185,000, let's call it, that have died. Of that number, 6%, about 9,500 people, died from COVID alone.
Yep.
Less than 10,000.
Yep.
That means that 94% of the 185,000 had these other comorbidities. Now, here is the dilemma. And to be reasonable and to be fair, there is a doctor from the U.S. Department of Health who came out a while back and said that when categorizing on death certificates and things, when categorizing COVID deaths, if you died, regardless of the immediate reason, and you tested positive for COVID, you would be listed as a COVID death. And that's according to the U.S. Department of Health. That's how they do it. What many people don't understand when it comes to death certificates, and this whole thing about cause of death and comorbidities and other factors or whatever, much like maybe the language in your workplace or in your industry. For instance, I worked, and my members of my family worked for Amazon in the warehouses. They have their own language.
Mm-hmm.
And only if you work there do you really know what the heck it means.
Yeah.
Doctors are just like that. The medical profession is just like that.
Absolutely.
Now, they can put things on a death certificate and say, you died, like if you died of a heart attack, you died of a myocardial infarction. That myocardial infarction was brought about by factors A, B, C, and D. Basically, what happened was something started the dominoes falling, and they ended up with you flatlining. And how those dominoes fell and what order sometimes is a little fuzzy. They really can't say precisely, oh, well, this led to this, led to this, led to this. And if you read the death certificates, they will say this gave rise to this, gave rise to this. Now, the danger in these new statistics is, what we do know for sure is that 6% of those people who died from COVID by itself. So we can definitely put those into a box. 9,500 people, COVID killed, all on its own. Now, if you did have comorbidities, whether that be heart failure, COPD, pulmonary failure, you're susceptible to pneumonia, you have whatever these other comorbidities, obesity, whatever they are. It's not saying that COVID did not play a role in those other conditions becoming life-threatening or deadly. Some folks have said, oh, well, these people died of other things and, they just tested positive. They died with COVID, not because of COVID. But if you look at it, probably the most reasonable explanation is that the COVID sure as hell didn't help the situation. That if you had COVID, it may have started a chain reaction of dominoes because of other health conditions that led to a person's death. But would that person have died absent those other conditions? If they had just gotten the COVID, would they have survived it? That's not really clear, and it's really hard to quantify what that means as far as a real threat to people.
Well, there's no way to know that. I mean, there's no way to theorize, without COVID and you had these other conditions, would you have survived anyway? Or without these other conditions and having COVID, would you have survived anyway? I mean, that's crystal balling, basically. And there's no way to accurately predict that.
But I think we can say, and this the CDC has said, is that people with COVID-19 have about, an 80% recovery rate?
I think it's somewhere in there, yeah.
75 to 80% of the people who contract COVID will survive.
It might even be higher. I think I've heard like low 90s.
Right. So I think, it's really hard medically because we're not trained, we're not doctors, and we're supposed to be processing this information and making rational, potentially, I guess, life and death decisions with us and our families, wearing masks, going out and about, doing this or doing that. We have to make these decisions, somewhere with some kind of rational thought. But I think, if you have a comorbidity, you are certainly more susceptible to COVID and a bad outcome. But if you do not have a comorbidity and you contract COVID, the odds are pretty likely you're going to recover with few or no ill effects. Matter of fact, most people, the CDC will tell you, most people who test positive for this right now are asymptomatic. They don't have even symptoms. They're walking around with it, but they're not, they don't have it.
They're not feeling it.
Right. So, I mean, this goes back to one of the early shows that we did. And we've done a couple on COVID. The first is that...
Well, I mean, who couldn't at this point?
Yeah. But the first one was that it's really hard for us in the media to accurately cover something when all the data is coming at you, flying at you from 1,000 different directions, and figures can lie, liars can figure, and the statistics can mean anything you want them to mean. I mean, on one hand, you can run the headline, 10% of the country has COVID. Well, that would mean what? 10% of the country? 33 million people. 33 million. Right? That's a lot. Well, right now our positive tests are 7.3 million out of 85 million. So let's, all right, it says a quarter of the country, let's times that by 4. 7 times 4 is 20. Yeah, about 30 million people. When this is all said and done, probably about 30 million people are going to actually have test positive for COVID. And of that, 30 million, 94% should be just fine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like any other illness. It really is like any other illness in the sense that, a large number of people will come in contact with it. Some people will be asymptomatic. Some people will actually become, sick from it. People will develop antibodies. I mean, this is all, it's really not news in terms of how this is playing out. I mean, we see it every year with colds and flus and stomach bugs and this and that. I mean, yes, this is a new disease. However, it's a virus, and this is what happens with viruses. People come in contact with them. You can't sequester yourself from the rest of the world forever and wrap yourself in saran wrap.
Well, let's say, and again, this is not to downplay. If you know somebody who's died or a member of your family who's died, it's horrible.
Oh, absolutely not.
But even if you take the numbers, and let's say right now it's 185,000, right? Let's give it an extra 15,000 margin of error. Let's say it's 200,000 for a quarter of the population. All right, so when this is all said and done, and who knows whether it's going to be a year, 2 years, whatever, when this virus goes through the population and we all get herd immunity, which we've all heard about, where enough people have become infected and developed antibodies that the virus cannot sustain itself. So even if that takes place at the current rates that we have, and we have the data for, that would mean at the most we're looking to lose is about 800,000 people. That sounds like a horribly high number. But it's nowhere close. Nowhere close to the 1.5 to 3 million figure that people were throwing around were going to die of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
The actual percentage of people who are dying from this is less.
Yeah.
Yeah, 800,000 is a lot, but it's nothing compared to what the Spanish flu was back in 100 years ago. That's estimated to have killed over 50 million people, probably a lot more. And the population, remember, was a lot less back then, so it was a much higher percentage. It's not like 50 million out of 7 billion people we have on the planet today. Well, what was the number you had for total deaths worldwide?
Let's see. Worldwide, ABC News is reporting worldwide more than 847,000.
Not even a million.
Mm-hmm.
Not even a million out of a population of 7 billion. Now, we have to be clear. like 3 of the 7 billion are in China. And we don't necessarily believe the numbers that China's reporting.
Well,
They could have
true.
5
And then
million dead, and for them that's
nobody would know.
pocket change as far as
And
people
then
go.
also, that same ABC News story reporting that more than 25.3 million worldwide have been diagnosed.
Okay. But again,
So,
you're talking millions
yeah.
compared to billions.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is where people have a hard time. I mean, we've done so much for safety, wearing masks and closing down businesses. 40% of the small businesses that shut down during this COVID pandemic, they doubt will ever open again. They're done. It's all over.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What about that damage? And by the way, when we go back to the whole COVID thing, we did have the doctor who said that whatever you die of, if you test positive for COVID, then you're considered a COVID death. We did have an incident in Orlando, and this was during a news press conference where this came out, and it is a fact. There was 2 young people here over a given week that they had this news conference. 2 young people in their 20s died of COVID. One had comorbidities. I forget what they were. But the other one died in a motorcycle accident but had tested positive for COVID, and they classified him as a COVID death, even though he died in a motorcycle accident with no relation to COVID whatsoever.
Yep.
Until we get these numbers parsed correctly, we really can't make any kind of rational decision about what COVID is, how dangerous it is, how long it may be around, what we need to do to protect ourselves while we're still trying to live our lives.
Well, I don't think that you'll ever get to that point where the numbers are parsed properly, because it's kind of like a snowball. You're at that point now where you've rolled so many layers, trying to unroll the layers and get back down to your starting point to figure out, okay, let's go back and figure out where we went wrong. I think it's kind of impossible at this point. There's so many, tests and numbers and cases. I don't think you'll ever get to that point. I think the numbers are always going to be this nebulous mess, because it's been so poorly handled on so many levels in terms of making sure that these numbers, and these deaths are accounted for properly. And a large part of that, too, is that, for every COVID patient, the hospitals were getting X more amount of dollars, for every COVID patient. So, of course, it's in the hospital's best interest to classify everything that walks through the door as COVID, whether you're COVID or not. So to me, I mean, there's a human factor there in terms of, the economics of it, and making sure we have enough. And I mean, who knows? It could have been that, they're classifying everything as COVID just in case, so they make sure they have enough funds should their communities suddenly be swamped in COVID. But, I mean, that's best case scenario, in terms of motives of people who are making those decisions. But yeah, I don't think you're ever going to get to that point. I think it's always going to be a nebulous mess. And I think that nobody's going to trust the CDC or, public health departments going forward in terms of numbers. Anybody who reads, the stories like this one we're talking about, in terms of how many actual COVID deaths there are that are just from COVID, and others like it where, lab errors and this and that and the other thing, who's going to trust them? Who's going to trust those numbers? Getting that trust back is going to be very difficult.
I agree with you. I'm running through some, for some of the different counties in New Jersey and around. We're going to do New York next, just to show, these are different comorbidities, and they're roughly around 30-40%. And a lot of it has to do with obesity, with a body mass index greater than 30. 12.3.
Well, that's shocking. We're in America.
Yeah, 12.3% diagnosed with diabetes, 6.8% with heart disease, 6.7% with COPD, 3.2% with chronic kidney disease. Let's look in New York, New York. In Isle of Manhattan, 29% had other comorbidities. Only 19% were obesity, 8% diabetes, 5.4% heart disease, 5.3% COPD, and 2.7%. So there's that.
Yeah, there's that.
So
Numbers matter.
they do, and we really need some help to kind of wrap our brains around this and to act appropriately. And so far, this is
The lick of common sense would be good.
but things have gotten so out of hand and so political on this. You know, if you believe one way, then you're trying to kill grandma. If you believe the other way, you know, you're ripping up the Constitution. And there are arguments to be made on both of those sides.
Yep, sure are.
I mean, we do have to have some measures taken to keep us safe as citizens of this country. And certainly the government has to have some role in keeping us safe from outside threats. And I would include a foreign virus among outside threats. I mean, it's the same as an invading army almost. You know, there has to be...
Yeah, and I would agree with that to a certain extent.
Yeah, there has to be some actions maybe taken. But I think that you have to be careful when you start micromanaging. And I think that's what happened here, especially in the case of, as we've said before, you know, New York Governors Cuomo, New Jersey Governor Murphy, Lamont in Connecticut, Ned Lamont in Connecticut. These guys are just on a power trip. These guys are getting their jollies by telling the common man what he can and can't do. You can't go to a funeral. You can't go to a wedding. If you have
I wouldn't quite call us common men. I would call us peasants, because that's what we are in their eyes.
Yeah, they're kings. Or Newsom in California. If you have a party at your house, we're shutting off your utilities. We're cutting off your electricity and water. What?
Yeah, that's their latest tool. That's their latest stick that they're using to beat people into submission.
Dude, Gov, buddy of mine. You do realize, of course, convicted murderers and rapists in jail still are allowed water and electricity. It's a bleeping human right.
Not according to them, it's not.
So if you have a house party in California, you are to be treated less human than a convicted felon.
Well, yeah, because they're letting the felons out so they can make room for all of us peasants that refuse to be ruled by their whims, essentially. I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of where what it looks like from our perspective. You know, it looks like they've been releasing all these felons to make room for us common criminals that refuse to wear face masks and, you know, walk the wrong way down the grocery store and down the aisles.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. It's just insane, the times we live in.
It is crazy. I mean, I don't know what more we can say about this, but
I think everyone just needs 2020 to come to a glorious end, and we'll get on with 2021, because 2020 has been a wash, essentially.
Do you think that a lot of these issues are going to either go away or resolve to a certain extent following the election?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 100% convinced. I mean, I saw this meme on Facebook. Somebody was saying they no longer call it the coronavirus; they call it the election infection, because I mean, if you think about it, yeah, I mean, it's really, a lot of it is aimed at making life unbearable for people, and so they'll think, you know, I don't quite understand the thinking, but my conclusion is that their goal is to make people's lives as difficult as possible thinking that they will blame it on the ruling party, which is the Republican Party and Trump's presidency. Therefore, they will vote the other into office. But I think they're forgetting that so many people have brains, and there's this thing called the internet. So people can actually look things up about either candidate, and there are other search engines other than Google. So you can see, compare the differences in the search results. So I think they're kind of forgetting that. But yeah, I think a lot of this, maybe not all of it, but I think a lot of it will disappear right after Election Day.
We will see. We will see.
Yep. Gonna get interesting.
The chart I have is just the number of up on the screen is the number of states that had schools closed in 2019 and 2020. And now we're getting into where schools are opening up again. Here in Florida, they're open. Buses are running. Kids are going. I find it interesting. Oh, that was the other thing. Actually, I wanted to go, if I can go back to this data tracker, and I want to go back to find something here. As far as the case trends, yeah, demographics. I found this. See, now I just went back. All right, deaths by state: 6 million cases, 184 deaths. This is probably the number you saw, Nicole.
It's the main page.
Yeah, deaths by state.
Numbers are in red. Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers I had were cases and deaths by county, and that number was higher. That's the one that was a 7 million or whatever. But the number, yeah. So you did have correct CDC information.
Well, I told you I did. You just have to actually believe me.
I believed you. I just thought maybe they updated it. I don't know.
You had to see for yourself. I know, it's fine.
All right, now here's the other thing. We have the charts, and again, these are from the CDC as of today. Okay, we have charts up, and these are the numbers. Now, everybody's been saying that the African American community, for example, has been disproportionately hit with COVID deaths. All right, so the number of positive cases, white non-Hispanic lead with 40.6%. Second place is Hispanic Latino with 30.7%. Black non-Hispanic is 19.3%. American Indian, Asian, and multiple or other are in single digits. Now, those are the cases. Deaths by race, ethnicity, according to the CDC in all age groups. 50.9% of the deaths are white non-Hispanic. 22% are black non-Hispanic, and 16% are Hispanic Latina. Again, other groups coming in single digits or less. So this is according to the CDC. That debunks the thing about African Americans being disproportionately impacted by COVID, either in cases or in deaths.
I think that I remember hearing that as well, and I think that was the initial reporting when this first started, and I think that was because the African American community has a large number of comorbidities, high blood pressure, that sort of thing, diabetes. So I think that that's why they were reporting that they weren't faring as well as other groups, because I do remember hearing that, and I remember hearing it was because of the high incidence of comorbidities in that population.
Well, in all fairness, it says that this demographic information was only available when you're talking about the cases. In 49% of reported cases, this demographic information was available. So in 51%, it was not available. That could be that could change everything. But the other way to look at it is, and the African American community would have a point. The African American community makes up approximately 13% of the U.S. population. So if they're being impacted with 19.3% of cases and 22% of deaths, that I guess would be disproportionate because it would be definitely higher than the percentage of the population they represent. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so.
Okay, so I mean that's one way of looking at it where that stat could actually be something. But otherwise, if you look at it compared to the number of whites and other ethnic groups that it's hit, they're not hit disproportionately more. They're less. Okay, data.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist, but sounds right to me.
Okay, now as far as the age group, the largest number of people, and we're going to combine several. If we're looking at a chart here, again, this is from the CDC. 1.7%, and this is 96% of almost 4.4 million cases. 1.7% were from age 0 to 4. 5 to 17 was 6.4%. The largest group is 18 to 29, 22.4%. 30 to 39, 17.1. 40 to 49, 15.7. 50 to 64, 21.2. 60 to 74, 7.8. 75 to 84, 4.5, and 85 plus 2.4. So the two largest groups of people with positive cases are 18 to 29 and 50 to 64. Deaths by age. 85 plus make up 31.7% of the COVID deaths. 75 to 84 is 26.4. Now you put them together, folks, that is a majority. That's 50.7. So almost 51%, more than half of the COVID deaths in America are age 75 and up. Now, if we throw in 65 to 74, that adds another 21%. That takes us up to 3/4, 75% of the deaths. You go to 50, we're now at like 90%. 90% of the people killed by COVID are between the ages of or 50 plus. 40 to 49, 3.2%. 30 to 39, 1.3%. 18 to 29, 0.5%. 5 to 17, less than 0.1%. 0 to 4, less than 0.1%. Okay? To give you an idea, this is 99% or 136,000 of the 137,000 people that died. Less than 90 were between the age of 0 and 17. 90. A total of about almost 800 between 0 and age 30. 800 out of more than 100,000. That's interesting. And here's one you'll love. As far as cases go, females get COVID more than males, 51.7 to 48.3%. Yet, females get it more than males. More than half of the people getting COVID are female. But more than half, 54% of the deaths are men and 46% are female. So the female, so as a female, you're more likely to get COVID, but less likely to die from it.
Well, they were attributing that to differences in behavior in terms of finding, doctors and getting medical treatment and that sort of thing. So that's what I heard in terms of the disparity there.
Okay, so that's that. It's just interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. These are also the trends. Here is a daily moving average, and as you can see, yes, there was an increase in cases, but this is also during the time when testing jumped up by a whole lot. And it's been coming back down. So it's kind of like we flattened the curve initially in April, but the testing was really, really small. Really, really small. It more than doubled with the increase in testing. But the average is coming back down the hill, so to speak. But if you look at it, if you look at it as a total, it just looks like an ever-increasing thing, because once you start counting the dead people, once you count them, the mountain is that high anyway. And every one you add on top of that is going to keep increasing. So it looks like the thing just keeps going up, but that's only because you're talking the total. So, but yeah. But if you look at deaths, there's barely any bump in deaths in June. It went up a little bit, and now it's leveled off. And it's nowhere near the highs of April. So, I think that's something to look at. Anything else you got on COVID?
No, that was pretty much it. I just wanted to talk about, the vast disparity in those numbers. So that's all I got.
Okay. Well, I guess that does it for us today. We want to tell you, if you like the show, please smash that like button, hit it, smash it, do whatever, but
don't break your phone.
Don't break your phone, but definitely press that like button. Subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when we're going to drop a new video. You can like us on Facebook on our page of Charcoal Media, CHARCOLE Media, 2 words. You can follow us. You can follow me at Twitter at S as in Sam, B as in boy, Newsman, and the numeral 1. And Nicole, where do they follow you?
Well, I'll have to spell it for you because it's a little long. So it's E as in Edward, C as in cat, R-I, V as in Victor, A-I, N as in Nancy, and the word special. And that's at, so that's me on Twitter. Okay.
You can follow Nicole at Twitter there. Also, you can email us at grillonline@citizenjournalistnetwork.com. So please, and the podcast will be available on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. You can find us all over the place. Please go over to Anchor, and there are links there where you can help support this podcast if you like our work. And, join our pages, like us, and comment, and we'll see you next week on What's Cooking.